Okay, so you know how sometimes a single event, like just one event, can completely change how we see the world?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're diving into one of those moments today. It's a story about Glacier National Park.
Hmm.
You know, this place of just absolutely stunning beauty,
Hmm.
but also a place where, back in the summer of 1967, this terrifying truth about nature's power was revealed.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about this particular story, is it totally shattered, like this illusion.
Yeah,
The illusion that had been built up around grizzly bears, this illusion that they were these like gentle giants,
right,
more cuddly than ferocious.
right.
This misconception, it had actually been fueled by, decades of pop culture, teddy bears, children's books, you name it.
Yeah, you're right. Back in the 60s, national parks were booming.
Yeah.
Families were hitting the road, eager to experience the great outdoors.
Hmm.
And seeing bears was a huge part of the allure.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost unbelievable now. But park rangers actually used to bait bears
Oh, really?
to get them closer to lodges and trails for tourists to see and photograph.
Can you imagine that happening today?
I know.
It really speaks to how much our understanding of wildlife and bears has evolved since then.
It's mind-boggling to think about.
I know, right?
But back then, park rangers actually considered bears to be relatively harmless.
Mm.
They ranked them low on the danger scale, even stating it was safer to encounter a bear in Glacier than, like, at a zoo.
Wow.
Statistically, they weren't entirely wrong.
Yeah.
There hadn't been a single fatal bear attack in the park's history up to that point.
However, this lack of fear, combined with what were, at the time, pretty lax attitudes towards things like littering,
Oh, right.
it created a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Bears were becoming habituated to humans and their garbage, losing their natural fear and wariness.
Yeah?
There were reports of, like, aggressive encounters,
Right.
but they were often dismissed as isolated incidents.
So it was like a ticking time bomb waiting to go off.
Exactly, and that brings us to the summer of '67, when that bomb, so to speak, finally detonated. Reports began circulating about this rather unsettling grizzly at Kelly's camp,
Kelly's cat.
a residential area within the park. This bear was described as, like, sickly, scrawny with a misshapen head, but what really stood out was her aggressive behavior,
Right.
which was very unusual for a grizzly.
Right. I remember reading about this in Joan Barry's account.
Oh, yeah.
She was a resident at Kelly's camp,
Mhm.
and she repeatedly warned park rangers about this bear's escalating aggression.
Wow.
She was convinced someone was going to get hurt.
Yes, Joan Barry's warnings are a crucial part of this story.
Yeah.
This bear was smashing into houses, stalking children, even trying to climb onto decks during dinner parties.
Oh, my gosh.
She was clearly in distress, likely suffering from injuries or an illness.
But her warnings were ignored,
Really?
despite park policy at the time, which was to kill any aggressive bears. It's almost like they couldn't believe a bear could actually pose a real threat.
And what's so tragic is this bear was very likely driven to this, like, desperate behavior by human actions.
Yeah.
When they eventually killed her, they found broken glass embedded in her mouth, most likely from scavenging in trash cans.
Oh, wow.
This would have caused her constant pain and made it difficult for her to eat properly,
Right.
explaining her, like, emaciated state and aggressive behavior.
It's heartbreaking to think about this bear already struggling, being pushed over the edge by human carelessness.
Yeah.
But sadly, her story is just one piece of this much larger tragedy.
Right.
While this, sickly grizzly was causing chaos at Kelly's camp, another story was unfolding.
Okay.
A story about a group of young park employees
Mm-hmm.
who were completely unaware of the danger that was lurking just beneath the surface.
Here we have this parallel narrative that highlights the naivety of the time when it came to bears. This group, mostly teenagers and college students, were excited for a weekend of hiking, fishing, and enjoying the, breathtaking beauty of Glacier. They were brimming with, like, youthful enthusiasm
Right.
and had absolutely no idea what was about to befall them. This group included Roy, an 18-year-old busboy, Julie, a 19-year-old working in the laundry room, and Paul, a 16-year-old who was so captivated by the park that he decided to stay on and work as a busboy after vacationing there with his parents. They, along with their friends Michelle, Denise, Ray, and Ron, were planning to camp at Trout Lake,
Trout Lake.
a spot known for its beauty and, unfortunately, as we'll learn, its bear activity.
It's important to remember that back then, bears were considered more of a nuisance than a genuine threat.
Right.
So even though the group encountered hikers on the trail who warned them about an aggressive grizzly at Trout Lake,
Hmm.
they decided to press on, convinced that they'd be fine.
They set up camp, fished, cooked dinner around a campfire.
Perfect. Sounds idyllic. But there's this sense of impending doom, knowing what we know now.
Right.
As the sun began to set, Michelle, gesturing towards the brush, casually announced, "Here comes a bear."
Oh.
They abandoned their campsite, leaving behind most of their supplies, and watched as a grizzly devoured their food.
This should have been a clear signal to pack up and leave.
Right.
But they decided to tough it out, setting up a new camp with a log barrier for protection.
Mm.
They heard bears throughout the night, even watched as one snatched their remaining food.
Oh, gosh.
Yet, despite the obvious danger, they eventually managed to fall asleep.
Meanwhile, Roy and Julie had planned to hike to the Granite Chalet, but they found it was overbooked.
Hmm.
They ended up camping nearby,
Hmm.
without a tent, having left their leftovers far into the woods, assuming they were safe. It was past midnight when Roy was jolted awake by Julie's urgent whisper, "Play dead."
This is where the story takes a very dark turn.
Yeah.
The night of August 12th, 1967 would become infamously known as the Night of the Grizzlies. Two separate bear attacks, occurring almost simultaneously, would forever etch this date into Glacier National Park's history.
It's hard to even imagine what the park must have felt like after those attacks. The mood must have shifted so drastically.
Absolutely. The news of these attacks, it spread like wildfire, quickly becoming a national tragedy, really.
Yeah.
That sparked fear, outrage. People demanded answers, struggling to understand how this could have happened in a place perceived as a sanctuary,
Right.
a place where nature's beauty was meant to be safe and accessible.
It's easy to see how that sense of safety was completely shattered,
Mhm.
especially given, the prevailing image of bears at the time.
Right, the cuddly image of bears, the one we had so carefully cultivated through teddy bears and cartoons, was suddenly replaced by this terrifying reality
Yeah.
of a powerful, unpredictable predator.
Right.
And the public's reaction, it was swift.
Yeah.
Trails were closed, campers were evacuated, and a hunt was immediately ordered for any bear found near the attack sites.
So they basically went into damage control mode, trying to reassure a terrified public.
Yes. 3 bears were killed near the chalet, including a female with dried blood on her paws, presumed to be the one that attacked Julie.
And what about that sickly grizzly from Kelly's camp?
Yeah.
The one Joan Barry had tried to warn everyone about.
Well, remember how she was last seen heading towards Trout Lake?
Right.
Rangers set a trap there, and tragically, it was that very bear, the one with broken glass in her mouth, that walked right into it.
Oh, wow.
She was killed, and later examination confirmed that her stomach contained blonde hair matching Michelle's.
That's just so sad, knowing that this bear was essentially driven to her death by human actions. But even with these killings, the public outcry didn't subside. People were terrified, and the future of grizzly bears, already struggling due to habitat loss and overhunting, looked incredibly bleak.
You'd think that this would have been the end of the story, that fear and anger would have prevailed, but instead, something remarkable happened. The Night of the Grizzlies actually became a catalyst for change, sparking a wave of conservation efforts fueled by this realization that we, as humans, had played a significant role in this tragedy.
So it was like a wake-up call, a moment of reckoning.
Precisely. The Endangered Species Act, passed in 1973, became a direct result of this shift in thinking.
Okay.
It provided crucial protection for grizzly bears and many other species on the brink of extinction.
Can you elaborate a bit more on the Endangered Species Act and how it works?
Of course. The Endangered Species Act, it classifies species as either endangered, meaning they are in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of their range, or threatened, meaning they're likely to become endangered within the foreseeable future. Grizzly bears at the time were listed as threatened. The Act prohibits the killing, harming, or harassing of listed species and mandates the development of recovery plans to help restore their populations. It also requires federal agencies to consider the potential impact of their actions on listed species.
So it wasn't just about protecting bears, but also about changing our own behavior, right?
Exactly. It was a complete paradigm shift in how we approach conservation. National parks across the country, including Glacier, they completely overhauled their bear management plans. They implemented what we now consider common sense measures, things that seem obvious today but were revolutionary back then.
Such as?
Well, for starters, they introduced bear-proof garbage cans, something we take for granted now.
Right.
They also designated cooking areas away from campsites and implemented strict rules against feeding or approaching bears. They even started educating visitors about bear safety, emphasizing the importance of respecting their space and understanding their behavior.
It's amazing how such a tragic event could lead to such positive and lasting change. It's a reminder that even in the face of fear and anger, we have the capacity to learn and adapt, to find a way to coexist with the natural world,
Yeah.
even its most powerful inhabitants. But as we see with those viral videos of people getting way too close to bison in Yellowstone, it seems some people still haven't gotten the message.
That's true. There's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to educating the public about wildlife safety. But while our understanding of bears and our efforts to coexist have improved, there's still that element of the unknown, that lingering fear that continues to shape our perception of them.
Perhaps it's a healthy thing, a reminder that venturing into their territory requires respect, caution, and a deep awareness of our own vulnerability.
I think you're right. The Night of the Grizzlies serves as this chilling reminder of what can happen when that balance is disrupted.
Right.
But it also highlights our capacity for change, our ability to learn from tragedy and forge a new path forward. And what's truly remarkable is that the story of Glacier National Park's bears doesn't end with that horrific night.
What happened?
Thanks to those policy changes and increased awareness, grizzly bear populations have actually rebounded in many areas.
Wow.
They've become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of conservation and our ability to coexist, even with creatures that inspire both awe and fear.
It's an incredible story of hope and resilience. But I'm curious, what do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
I think for me, the most important takeaway from all of this is we have to move beyond this idea that we can control nature. We
Right.
can't just build fences and expect that to solve everything.
Yeah.
It's about understanding, I think, the interconnectedness of all things, humans, animals, the environment. It's about finding ways to coexist.
It makes you realize that even seemingly small actions, like throwing away a candy bar wrapper, can have major consequences,
Oh, absolutely.
especially in a place like Glacier National Park.
Exactly. And, that's what's so encouraging about the aftermath of the Night of the Grizzlies. We saw this huge shift in thinking,
Yeah.
this realization that we have a responsibility to protect these animals and their habitat.
Right.
And that responsibility, it goes beyond simply avoiding encounters in the wild.
It's about advocating for their protection,
Mm-hmm.
minimizing our impact on their environment, and, really understanding the important role they play in a healthy ecosystem.
Precisely. And the lessons we learned from that tragic event, they didn't just stop there.
Right.
They had this ripple effect. Think about the development of bear-resistant food canisters, the
Yeah.
growing popularity of ethical wildlife tourism, and the increasing awareness of the need to preserve wilderness areas.
It's amazing how those events, as horrific as they were, actually became this turning point in our relationship with the natural world. It's like
Right.
we finally started to see that our well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the planet and all its creatures.
Absolutely. And the Night of the Grizzlies serves as this incredibly powerful reminder
Yeah.
about the consequences of underestimating nature.
Yeah.
It's a lesson about humility, about respect, about recognizing our responsibility as stewards of this planet.
And while it's a tragic story, it ultimately offers a message of hope, right? It shows that we can learn from our mistakes, we can change our behavior, and we can find a way to live in harmony with nature, even with creatures as powerful as grizzly bears.
I completely agree. And that message is more relevant than ever, especially as we face global challenges like climate change and biodiversity loss.
Yeah.
We have to remember that we're not separate from nature, we're a part of it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Night of the Grizzlies, what would you say is the most important thing for our listener to take away?
I would say, think about your own relationship with the natural world. How can you minimize your impact? How can you be an advocate for wildlife and wild places? Every step we take to understand and protect nature is a step towards a future where both humans and wildlife can thrive.
It's a powerful reminder that our actions matter, and that even small changes can make a big difference. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a truly insightful conversation.
It was my pleasure.